So I'm going to turn on that record button. And then again, just thank you for being here today. So I'm going to hit start class, but if you just popped in, I'm going to drop the code in the chat so it's easier for you to see. But we're going to talk asynchronous versus synchronous learning, which is probably two words that never really crossed our mouths until we really hit the shutdown back in March. And so, you know, unless we were talking a little bit about blended learning, but here we go. Today we're going to define what both of those types of learning can look like, discuss what's going to work best for your specific classes, explore a couple of assessment strategies, and then again, reflect on how you might use it this fall. And, you know, I think we're on to a new adventure next week. And again, one day at a time, if that's how we're thinking about everything, I think that's going to be okay for a couple of weeks here. So the reason why I like to have you guys sign in is because I like to send you the takeaways. So you'll get a copy of this slide deck as well as all the links that I'm sharing. Any notes you take, you will have access to as well. And so it's just a really great resource. And one of the reasons why I like to share takeaways with students is because then they can access that at a later time. So, when should we utilize asynchronous and synchronous learning? I think that's the big question on everybody's mind. And the big thing is, you know, thinking about how you might organize your lessons. I know that especially in science, and, you know, we've had conversations in our division as well, of talking about starting synchronous. So starting where everybody can be on the same page. I think there's a lot of benefit to that because we finally are starting to feel successful with where we're at. Keeping things synchronous or live with everyone, no matter where our students are at, is a great way to start. But some of you might also, especially with lab periods, be thinking about when they're face-to-face, you can have them physically doing some different types of activities. So this resource is in our CG Canvas support page, as well as you'll have access to it here on just how you might flip-flop those lessons, whether they're face-to-face or remote, and what that could look like. So you might choose to create 5 lessons in a week, and then just rotate what those lessons are. So utilizing some of those blended learning principles. But again, depends on your discipline. It depends on what you're doing with your students. There is no right or wrong answer. It's simply finding what works best for you. Any questions or initial thoughts on some of the hybrid learning models or anything that maybe you've discussed in your different divisions so far? Well, feel free to jump in at any time. So also on Canvas, and I'm going to pull that up here, we have, so this is the CG Canvas support page. The instructional coaches throughout the district, we all teach different disciplines. So we tried to create a sample, and I'm going to click on science here. A sample lesson. So this was created by Katie Bowman, who is at Chris Lake South, in terms of what those lessons could look like. And so she's got different content-specific models and examples of what that could look like. If we go back to my English people here, in addition to mapping out what a typical week could look like in my class, I also tried to think about the activities. And no matter what discipline you are, this might be a really helpful practice, is going through the typical activities that happen in your class, whether it is a lab experience, whether it is a reflection, having a discussion, completing a group project, and then thinking about 2 or 3 different ways that could be synchronous or asynchronous and what that could look like in your classroom. So again, that resource is there for you to explore a little bit more. But whatever is going to work best for you is what we're encouraging you guys to do. So,
Steph, can I interrupt for a second?
Absolutely.
So I was sitting in the Pear Deck, and and I was on that Pear Deck slide, and you're like, so I'm going to show you an example, and I kept waiting and waiting and waiting for the example, and then it dawned on me, I got to get out of Pear Deck and back to Zoom. how do you like to keep do the kids have split screens? I mean, I found that to be very frustrating, is that I would be pointing at something and then they'd be like, what are you looking at? You know, like that communication, especially if half of them are in the room and can see what you're talking about and the other half don't say anything.
So it's a little bit harder when I'm doing, a teacher-led PD, when I'm trying to because I'm trying to show you guys the student view and the teacher view at the same time. So I typically will have you guys going in and out. When it comes to students in Pear Deck, I only ever want them to look at their Pear Deck screen. So I don't ask them to come back to Zoom. The only time I would do that is if, for example, we're doing like a drawing activity and I want them to visualize and see what other people have drawn, then I'll typically stop sharing my screen and then redirect them to come back into Zoom. So it's just something to be cognizant of, and I think you raised a really great point. I think for when I'm talking to you guys, because I'm trying to show you both student and teacher view at the same time, I might jump around a little bit more, but that's a really great point. With kiddos, if you are in Pear Deck, the wonderful thing about Pear Deck is then you control their screen. So you can kind of control when they advance to different slides. And that's why I use the app smashing. So I'll put like a Padlet into Pear Deck so that they never have to leave to go to Padlet somewhere else. They just see it in one screen.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So yeah,
Thank you.
because you're an advanced learner. I'm just trying to challenge you left and right here. So
it took me way too long to figure that out. There's no advancedness going on here.
But a really great, and just a side benefit of experiencing Pear Deck from the student perspective, now you've got that empathy too, like, oh, now I get what they're seeing and I better make sure that we're on the same page. So thank you for pointing that out. I think that's a really great point. So let's go back to the Pear Deck here. And again, something that I found super helpful when I was preparing for next week is just making this chart. And I made this chart last weekend and I just brainstormed, what do I do in my class? And then how might I do that? And again, just having 2 or 3 bullet points, not a ton of different options, using kind of the same 2 or 3 tech tools, so not using too many tech tools, keeping it really simple, I think was going to be really helpful for me moving forward in terms of thinking about, what this is going to look like for all of my students. The phrase I find myself using the most is finding ways to visualize learning. So Padlet, really simple way to see what everybody's doing at the same time. A Google Doc or a Google Slide, really simple way for everybody to see what's happening. And to Katie's point there, we have to remember that kids, 60% of our students are going to be out of the room at a given time. And so we want to make sure that they can see that visual learning as well. And so collecting information on something like a Padlet or a Google Doc can be really beneficial. But speaking of all sorts of different tech tools, again, we've got this resource, the D155 master tech tools list. There's so many tech tools out there. These are some of my favorites, but now is not the time to learn something new. So if you're comfortable with Pear Deck or you're comfortable with Flipgrid or Padlet, stick to what you know and think about the activities that you want your students to do. And then again, ask yourself, how are you going to make that learning visible for everybody in the room? So just another thing to think about. Now, here are some questions for all of us to consider. And as you can see here in Pear Deck, I've gave you a little text box. So this text box, if you guys want to take a minute to just jot down your ideas, I'm not going to show the screen. I just want to know, when you're thinking about your lessons, are you introducing a concept or an instructional experience that might have further questions? If you're teaching a new concept and there's going to be a lot of questions, something to think about is that lesson should probably be synchronous or live so that students have an opportunity to ask questions. If it's something where they're practicing or they're experimenting, maybe it's something that can be done asynchronously. So thinking about what needs to be done in real time and what can students handle on their own. And so if you answered yes to a lot of these questions, then you're looking at synchronous. So things that need to be done in real time, have a lot of questions, and students might need live feedback. But if they don't need live feedback, if they aren't going to have a lot of questions, then maybe it can be asynchronous. So those two definitions, again, synchronous is that real-time live instruction. Asynchronous is things that students can do at their own, on their own. EdPuzzle is my absolute favorite tool for asynchronous work. So if I want to know that my students are watching a video or understanding a concept and I'm teaching it asynchronously, tools like EdPuzzle can help guide the students through practice even if I'm not there. So if I was doing a real lesson, and when I originally designed this particular session, even more than any other session, it was designed to originally be asynchronous. So you guys were supposed to do this, or could essentially do this entire Pear Deck on your own. And so one great thing about Pear Deck is I can turn on student pace mode. So if I click here, and I click these three dots on the bottom of my screen, if you are looking at my screen, you turn on student pace mode. Now, friends, try to go to a different slide. So be in Pear Deck, try to move around. Let me make sure it took. So I see you guys, you're on totally different screens, you're moving around. If this was an asynchronous lesson, you can see that I have a video embedded here, and then I have a question or a spot for you to record your notes. You could watch this video at any time. You could advance through the slides at your own speed. So this asynchronous student pace mode is a really great way to teach new concept, to get students to show and make their learning visible, but also empower them to do it at their own pace. So turning on student pace mode is a great way to take a Pear Deck lesson and make it asynchronous. All right, and I'm gonna turn off student pace mode now. And as soon as I turn that off, you should all be brought back to my slide. And so you can let students work asynchronously, whether they're live in the classroom or they're at home. So turning on and off that feature really gives you some freedom and some opportunities to tailor and customize the lessons to your students. Again, synchronous learning is that traditional face-to-face learning. Synchronous learning often occurs as students learn new concepts. It's typically what we do, like I said, start of the week on those Mondays, having some asynchronous time or synchronous time so you are live with your students and can set up the entire week. Gives you a lot of flexibility. Any questions with that? Sweet. Well, if you look here, I have a couple of different one-pagers or tips and tricks that you guys can feel free to access. And again, when I end this session, you'll have access to these different resources. And so when you're going through your lesson step by step, for me, I like to answer a couple of really quick questions. And so thinking about, like, how do I start a class face-to-face? How might I build rapport with students? You know, again, there's different resources for different parts of the process. Remember, next week, it's okay to take things slow. It's okay to keep doing what we've been doing because that's what students expect and that's what they're used to and also what we're used to too. So setting up and starting synchronous is a great way to really get the class rolling. Moving forward here, you know, I think some of you have already attended this session. When it comes to group work can really occur live and synchronous, or it can occur asynchronously as well. And just so you guys know, students can create their own Google Hangouts, and it's been tested in classrooms where students can be on different Hangouts. As long as they have earbuds, that makes that pretty helpful. But students can be on multiple different Google Hangouts/Meet at the same time. So you might consider connecting or pairing your students with a person in the classroom and at home, so if you're doing synchronous or live learning. If you're doing asynchronous learning, again, you can have students working in all different places and at all different times too. So that asynchronous piece, again, if you were part of any of the blended learning training or attended any of the sessions that Paul Humpa did a year, 2 years ago as well, you know, one of the biggest benefits for blended learning or asynchronous learning is students can pick the time, they can work at their own pace and kind of jump around and follow their own path too. So differentiation becomes really, really powerful in asynchronous learning. The drawback is that, you know, it takes us a lot more time to set up and process, but can be really beneficial. So some synchronous ideas. So those real live assessments can be using breakout rooms in Zoom, using the quiz feature in Canvas, any sort of speeches or presentations. How many of you, let me stop and see your lovely faces there. How many of you are probably going to do some sort of presentation in the next 2 months? Okay, a good chunk of you. Yeah, so I see Katie's like, no presentations. Well, friends, you can still do live presentations. Even if students are at home, they can be on Zoom. But that gets super glitchy. So I've actually been doing all of my speech presentations asynchronously, and then the students record their videos at any time, and then we can actually watch them live and be synchronous in class. So they pre-record their videos, but then we get to watch them and experience them in a different way, which really helps with technology and helps when you've got 3 different groups of students and you're trying to figure out who is going to be where. So creating or collecting work asynchronously still can lead to a live synchronous experience. It just looks a little bit different. So thinking outside the box can be helpful. And demonstrations, quizzes, and time tests. As we know, as I know Kushali was talking about, sometimes new quizzes gets a little glitchy. So just make sure you keep an eye on any moderated question in new quizzes. I'm hopeful that gets fixed soon because new quizzes will be out of beta in January.
I have a question. So
Yes.
is there a really easy way to tell if you're in new quizzes or old quizzes?
So new quizzes is, it looks a little bit different. So new quizzes, once you hit save, once you like set up like the due dates and all of that, you press save, it takes you to a screen and it looks a little more updated. It has like a circle plus button, so it's almost like a blank sheet, and it looks almost more like a website. So you have to hit the plus button to get new questions. Oh,
That's new.
that's the new quizzes.
So the old one is where there's the links on the left with each question.
No, that's new quizzes. Here, I can let me pull it up for you. All right, so if I were to go to quizzes here, you can only access quizzes from, or new quizzes from the quizzes section. You hit that plus button. So this looks very, very similar in both. I'm gonna have to go out of that course. So when I'm in quizzes here, I hit that plus button. It gives me the option to choose classic quizzes or new quizzes. And so I'm gonna select new quizzes there. And so see how it looks very similar on this particular page. But then once you press save, I'm gonna be, it brings me here. This is what new quizzes looks like.
With the word build. Okay.
Yeah, and then you've got this little circle plus button.
Okay.
Good.
Steph, quick question on that. So like when I go to build, because I've been just going to modules and I build my quizzes in my module, and that creates it, I believe, through old quizzes.
Yes.
Is there a benefit or drawback to me doing that right now versus trying the new quizzes?
So any of your classic quizzes is going to be mitigated to new quizzes.
Okay.
So, you know, thinking about as you're building, the only advantage here is if you are using a lot of stimulus, which is like if you were embedding YouTube videos into your quizzes, or a lot of charts and graphs. So specifically my science people and my social science people, they're going to want to definitely build the new quizzes because they'll be able to integrate more media. For us in the English department, we're probably just using it for mostly multiple choice, maybe some matching. Building in classic quizzes, it'll get transferred over very nicely to new quizzes. So either is really okay.
Got it. Thank you.
The help that you gave me earlier this week or last week on how to then move the new quiz because it doesn't show up in the module. I don't know if anyone's interested in knowing how to do that.
Sure. Let me share my screen. So unfortunately, new quizzes is the only thing that you don't build in modules. You have to build it through quizzes because it's still in beta, which makes it a little more complicated, which is why, unfortunately, I think we're still having some glitches. So if you build your quiz, but you want it to be in the correct order so that for future classes, it's a really smart idea. You're going to go into modules, and then you can hit that plus button, and then you can find your quiz and add it there. So it's always really smart to, again, one of the biggest reasons why I like to encourage teachers to build in modules is because this becomes our resource, our roadmap for future classes, which is really the big benefit of Canvas as a whole, is that it is a ton of work, too much work up front. But hopefully next year, when we are hopefully back into this normal world, this becomes really helpful to have it organized in modules. Really great point. Thanks for bringing that up, Sharona.
You're welcome. Yeah, help me.
Any other questions or thoughts at this point? All right, friends. Well, we are going to keep going here and talk a little bit more about asynchronous assessments. I think the biggest challenge for us with asynchronous assessments is, we have to remember that kids can Google anything at any time, so it becomes really critical for us to just think about what needs to be done live, what can be done on paper potentially if students are in the building, remembering that about 20% of our students will never be in the building, but what can they do at any time? And when I think about my science friends, I think about lab reports, essays in English or Spanish, screencasts, quizzes, discussion. Remembering with quizzes, if it's Googleable, they probably will do it. So we want to make sure that we make that visible. If there is a problem, and I've talked to several math teachers about this, if you want to be able to check students' work and make sure that they're not just copying from a friend, a really cool way to do that is to have students create a screencast. Whether it is using Screencastify, using the video feature in Canvas, or using Flipgrid, whatever tool you're most comfortable with, you can have students talk through a problem. So you can have them voice record or screencast and show that they understand the process of a physics experiment, or they understand the process of any concept that you're teaching in art. Video is a really great way to again, make that learning visible and hold them accountable for the critical thinking component of all of our different disciplines. And the good thing is that can be done asynchronously because using video, they can create that video at any time in any place. So here is a really great video. And again, we're not going to watch it live together, but I will make sure that you guys have that in the takeaways. It's super short, but it talks about effective video creation. And so I'm sure many of us have made a couple of screencasts or have made some videos. If we're trying to multiply ourselves and be in 3 places at the same time, videos can help. What's really nice is, especially if we teach common courses, so if you have someone in this room who teaches the same course as you, perhaps you can divide and conquer and you can share your videos with each other. And so the biggest tip and takeaway of making videos for learning purposes is to keep them short. If the videos, like there was some college did research on a length of time that a K-12 student will sit and watch a video. And typically it's advised that 6 minutes is the amount of time that students will sit and watch a video before they drift off. So if you're gonna make a video, think about keeping them short. You can make multiple videos if you have a very complicated concept that you're trying to explain, especially, you know, I think about my chemistry teachers. You definitely have some complicated problems and math equations that you're utilizing in your experiments. So segmenting those videos becomes really helpful. Using tools like EdPuzzle can be really helpful too to break up that learning. So what tools will help me to be synchronous? Again, when we're talking synchronous, Zoom, Pear Deck, Teacher Pace Mode, Kahoot, Quizzes, and Quizlet. You know, I've been so surprised. My seniors, we do have some concept in some chapters we have to read from MCC for my class, and the kids always want to review on Kahoot. Without fail, every kid is like, my favorite part of the week is when we do our weekly Kahoot. And so, you know, going back to some of those silly, you know, formative tools can just keep them really, you know, keep them engaged. I love seeing, yeah, you can circle any tool that you've used. I see people are circling, which is fantastic. Way to go, Mr. Hester. So you know, that idea that you can utilize these live or not live. Quizlet can only really be played live, but the other tools could be synchronous or asynchronous. So I love seeing your drawings. I can show the responses too. And if I show the responses and I want you to look at it, I would just tell you guys, hey, why don't you check out my Zoom screen and you can see what everybody has said. And it's so fun. Oh, yay, smiley face. It is so fun to do the stackables and to do the drawings. So one of the biggest benefits of Pear Deck, if you want them to come back to your Zoom screen, you can show them any sort of collaborative drawing that they've done. But going back to Pear Deck here, what tools can help you asynchronously? Again, there are so many tools, but don't try new tools this first week. Stick to what you're comfortable with, stick to what's routine. You know, for me specifically, I really just use, I use Flipgrid once a week, I use EdPuzzle once a week, I'll do Pear Deck and Kahoot once a week. And then sometimes I throw in a Padlet or, you know, a Google Doc, but I'm keeping it really minimal for my students. And so again, I could show you if I wanted to, I could show you guys, I love seeing all your drawings of what you guys are really using. It looks like a lot of people are using EdPuzzle already, which is a great asynchronous tool. So that's really cool. And so, when you think about like, so if you are back on the Pear Deck here, you can see that I've app smashed in what was your favorite tech tool during remote learning. If you guys want to, could you go to Pear Deck, your Pear Deck tab, and can you answer for me, what is your favorite tech tool to use during remote learning? What have you used so far that you love to use with your students?
Hey, Steph.
Yes.
For some reason, when I'm looking at my Pear Deck, it's not on the same page as yours. It says it's on slide 18.
Let me see. You should be, can you advance?
It won't let me, no.
Try to hit refresh.
Oh, okay.
But looking at your guys's screens here.
So I can't type in it. I've tried.
I saw you typing before.
I know, and now I can't.
When in doubt, hit refresh. EdPuzzle, Katie, good collaborative conversations on Padlet. That's cool. EdPuzzle, Padlet, breakout rooms via Zoom. You know, again, I think we're seeing that we're using a couple of common, you know, tech tools, and when we use those common tech tools, you know, our students know what to expect. And that can make things a lot easier. Oh, Sharon, now I see Padlet, Padlet, Padlet.
Yeah, I'm typing. I like how, oh, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I like how you can approve their posts before they put them on too. I like that.
Yeah, there's so much. Padlet's so versatile. And again, you can make them, I really like using the shelf in Padlet. So I'll pose multiple questions and have kids respond to multiple things. You can have different types of activities in Padlet. So it's just a great way to get that visible learning and hold everybody accountable. How did Devin? Beth, what's your question? Get his name. Yeah, well, if you go to the upper right-hand corner and you click the gear, you can sign in to Padlet. A lot of times our students don't sign in, which is kind of a bummer. But I always say to kids, I tell them, I'm using this for attendance, so make sure your name is on it. And then you can always go back and look for and double check the students too. They do a good job of putting their name if we prompt them, but they can sign up in the upper right-hand corner. So celebrate your success. What worked well, either synchronous, asynchronous, or both during remote learning? What's going great? And if you want to drop that in the Padlet, then we can celebrate. Oh, I already see some people's responses. Sharon, you're making me laugh. Eric's got a boring answer. Grammar works well. Just teasing.
Does anybody have a terrible time spelling asynchronously off the top of their head without looking at it? Because I spell it wrong every time.
It took me a really long time to be able to spell it, but I've had to type it so much that I've got, no, that is not an easy word to spell, but I think this is a really great point, is getting so little feedback from students. One thing that I try to do once a week is just a social emotional flip grid. So I just give them a flip grid where I literally ask them the same 2 or 3 questions every week on A, how are you doing as a human being? B, what is working in the class? And C, what is not working in the class? And so I ask them very directly. That's been really helpful. And doing it for a couple of weeks now, their conversational tone is so different. And unfortunately, the only place that they typically want to respond is, through the flip grid. But that can help. Pre-recorded demos, I love that. I would love to watch some of those science demos. Those are so fun. Using Screencastify to reteach. The cool thing to remember, folks, is that if we know we're doing live instruction, we can always record our Zooms. So you can always record your Zoom and then snip it down to just the few minutes that you need if you're doing any sort of live demo or synchronous teaching. So utilize your synchronous teaching through Zoom, record it, and then be able to share it asynchronously either with another group of students or share it asynchronously in the future too. Yes, in-class discussions, those are going to be so great, hopefully, just because they won't have to unmute. All right, I'm going to slide my, said that my audio was glitchy for sure. That can be the frustrating thing, and hopefully that will be less of a problem when they're in the building and have better Wi-Fi. So there are benefits to both types of learning, and consider what your students need. Again, certain disciplines might have more asynchronous work than other disciplines. For me, as in the English realm, there are some weeks when we are digging in and we're doing a lot of grammar or we're doing a lot of live discussions. But then in other weeks, they might be doing more reading, more prep work, prepping for a speech. So it is okay to move back and forth synchronously and asynchronously based on what works well for you. I see a couple people are posting that you're probably more synchronous. And so again, instructions on writing and instructions on like live discussions tend to be more synchronous, but asynchronous could be could be that practice piece. In art could be them actually creating their drawings, their paintings, and so forth. So looking at your responses too, lower levels of Spanish, definitely more synchronous. Maybe with our freshmen, sophomores, we are going to be more synchronous, but seniors, they might be, working asynchronously. And for me, I currently have seniors doing a research project. A lot of their work is asynchronous. And so I might start the class synchronous and live, go through and review a certain skill, and then give them a lot of time to work. So I'm going to move forward to, we're just about ready to wrap up here, and I want to give a few minutes for questions, but there is this really nice, it's called a mix map, and it's just a, concentric circle activity where you can go through and write down, what are some things that absolutely non-negotiable need to be synchronous? What are some things that, might actually work better asynchronously because students work at different paces? And then it's all about finding what's kind of that middle ground. I think this is really where we're gonna live a lot of the time, knowing and giving our students flexibility and trying to work with everybody at different places and all of our technology issues. So just keep that in mind that this chart might be a really helpful brainstorm for you to work on at any given time. And last thing, I've got this quick reference for you guys on what's synchronous, what's asynchronous. Again, just some quick ideas and just the act of, or doing the exercise of the chart. Okay, what are the activities that I'm gonna do? How might I do that? Having some sort of chart, whatever that looks like for you, can be really, really helpful. And finally, after looking at and reflecting on asynchronous and synchronous lessons, I hope that you find what works for you and keep sharing your amazing ideas. And I won't have you fill out the Padlet here, but again, here's a quick, as you guys were saying, Padlet's a quick and easy way to make that learning visible. So give me the thumbs up or the thumbs down. How are you feeling about integrating asynchronous and synchronous learning into your lessons? Where are you guys at? If you want to, you can look at my slides here and look that you guys a lot of us are moving towards green, which brings me so much joy. So I'm so glad to hear that we are progressing and that we're moving forward together. That's my session for you guys. Do you guys have any questions, or how can I best support you?
Steph, I threw a question in the chat.
Oh, perfect. So, if the Zoom audio is glitchy, will that affect the recording of the video? Yeah, I've had some videos that are a little choppy. Typically, that's much better. Usually the glitch is on the student end, especially if they're in a home where somebody's streaming Netflix. There might be 3 kids or 3 people on the Wi-Fi. They have their phones going. That's a good, and typically the biggest reason why their computers or their Chromebooks are glitchy is they have too much going at the same time.
Because right now for me, you're kind of glitchy.
Yeah.
Oh no, I might have too many things going at the same time.
So, but would that then affect the recording of your lesson?
Probably, yes. If it glitches on my end, yes, it'll affect the recording.
Okay.
So good. I'm sorry that I'm a little glitchy.
I can figure it out.
To see what happens when we have more people in the building,
Right.
online.
I have been in meetings and I have definitely talked to Doug about that. And I have heard that we are barely using any of our bandwidth right now. So we should feel pretty good about the students being in the building. But we'll see, I guess.
So I had a question about the Zoom audio as well, like if you're recording. So if I record my session and I share my screen, the recording for the students will show me and the screen?
Yes, you'll be a
I'm
tiny
sure.
little box in
Okay.
the screen is big.
And it won't show all the students who were, like if I were doing it, yeah, it wouldn't show any students that were logged in to Zoom?
It will only show people that are talking. So if a student unmutes and answers a question, then it'll show.
Okay. Is that still okay to share with the rest of the students though?
So when I publish anything with that, I would make it unlisted. And so if it's unlisted, that means only anyone with the link can view. So if you're posting it on Canvas, then only your students who have access to the course will be able to see that, and that is okay.
Okay.
Good question. Other questions? Well, as you know, guys, I am here anytime. Book me, email me, you know, hopefully don't text me at 2 in the morning, but I can't promise that I wouldn't respond. So I hope you guys are feeling a little bit better and know that we are all gonna not be perfect or great for this first week. And, you know, that's okay, because our students are just gonna want that social emotional connection, and that's what it's all about. So start there, and then anything else is a victory after that. All right, friends, I'm